Chris Evert is one of the most celebrated athletes in the history of tennis. With 18 Grand Slam titles to her name, she was widely regarded as the embodiment of precision, discipline, and cold-blooded control on the court. The media dubbed her the Ice Maiden, a nickname that captured both her ruthless competitive edge and the invisible emotional wall she kept between herself and the world. For decades, she made the world kneel in awe with her two-handed backhand, her command of the clay court, and her ability to calculate every move with machine-like accuracy. She was the untouchable icon who redefined what perfection looked like in professional tennis. But life, unlike a tennis match, does not operate by rules that any champion can master, no matter how disciplined they may be. As the world slowly emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021 and 2022, Chris Evert, now in her late 60s, was forced to face a battle unlike anything she had ever encountered on a tennis court. There were no cheering spectators, no umpires, and most painfully, no partner standing by her side. She received a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, a life-or-death sentence delivered in part to the tragic legacy of her late sister Jeannie, who had died from the same disease. It was Jeannie's passing that had prompted Chris to get tested. The blood work took about 10 days to come back, and when the results confirmed she carried the BRCA gene mutation, she knew there was no choice to be made. She had to fight. But the painful reality was that she was going to face this largely alone. At the time of her diagnosis, Chris Evert was single. Her third and final marriage, to golf superstar Greg Norman, had ended in 2009 after only about 15 months together. Fame, fortune, and a legendary career could not buy her a partner to hold her hand in the hospital waiting room. She was not simply between relationships. She was a woman who had walked through 3 broken marriages, each one a very public declaration of love, and each divorce a very public unraveling under the unforgiving scrutiny of the media. Chris Evert had been remarkably candid about the price she paid for her extraordinary career. The iron discipline she cultivated on the court inadvertently created emotional distance in her personal life. She spent her youth chasing athletic perfection, and that singular focus did not always align with the warmth, vulnerability, and compromise that lasting marriages require. In a rare admission, she said, "I have been divorced 3 times. I think I paid a price for my career." Now, facing a stage 1C ovarian cancer diagnosis in the winter of 2021, that loneliness was magnified to an almost unbearable level. The battle was not just about chemotherapy and surgery. It was about prolonged anxiety, repeated hospital visits, crushing physical exhaustion, and the kind of nameless fear that visits you at 3 in the morning when the house is silent and no one is beside you. The solitude of serious illness is not just the absence of a hand to hold. It is the absence of someone who understands your medical history, handles the groceries when your body collapses, and sits with you in the dark without needing you to perform a strength you do not have. Although Chris had 3 wonderful sons, the psychological burden of facing potentially terminal illness without a life partner was ever present. The public assumed she would face this as she had faced everything, alone and unbreakable, the Ice Maiden enduring her greatest opponent in solitude. But Chris Evert's life has always been full of unexpected turns. To understand the magnitude of what happened next, you have to understand her second marriage to Andy Mill, a former Olympic-level alpine ski racer. Andy Mill was strong, resilient, calm, and grounded in a way that balanced Chris's intensity perfectly. Together, they built a real family. They had 3 sons, Colton, Nicholas, and Alexander. And for nearly 18 years, they shared a life that gave Chris a glimpse of who she could be outside of tennis. He was not just her husband. He was the closest thing to a stable foundation she ever had in a personal relationship. But even solid foundations can crack. In 2006, after 18 years together, they announced their divorce. What made the split feel truly final in the eyes of the public was the financial reality of the settlement. According to widely reported accounts, Chris Evert paid Andy Mill approximately $7 million connected to the couple's Aspen home and asset divisions. That sum became a symbol of total severance. When that much money changes hands in a divorce, the world's assumption is that both parties want nothing more to do with each other, that the chapter is closed, sealed, and buried. So when Chris Evert began cancer treatment, no one expected Andy Mill to appear. He had, in the public's mind, been paid to exit her life. He had no legal obligation, no contractual reason, and by conventional logic, possibly every emotional reason to stay far away. And yet, against every expectation, Andy Mills showed up, not with a brief courtesy visit, but with a sustained, committed presence that went far beyond anything the law or social convention required. He was there before her prophylactic surgery, and he stayed. He and their sons coordinated her care, took turns ensuring she was never left alone after a chemotherapy session, handled the cooking, the errands, and the appointments. With his calm athlete's demeanor, Andy Mill became a steady wall for Chris to lean on when her own strength was gone. What made this act so extraordinary was precisely that it was not obligatory. He was not bound by vows. He was not motivated by money. There was no legal mechanism compelling him to be there. He simply chose to show up as family, because that is ultimately what he was. He was a father of her children, and the mother of his children was fighting for her life. His action was a silent act of courage and a loud act of love, the kind that does not announce itself but simply appears when it is most needed. Chris Evert, who rarely allowed herself to show vulnerability in public, openly acknowledged that this support was an absolute source of strength. She said, "What Andy has done for me and the boys goes far beyond any obligation. He helped keep things stable and gave me the peace of mind to focus on getting well. That's worth more than any amount of money." For a woman who had built an entire identity around not needing anyone, those words represented profound transformation. The Ice Maiden was learning to let others in, and in doing so, she was not losing her strength. She was discovering a deeper kind of it. The story grew even more remarkable when Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert's greatest rival on the court and the woman she had faced 80 times across iconic matches, announced that she too was battling cancer. What once might have seemed impossible, a genuine bond between two fiercely competitive opponents, became one of the most moving subplots of Chris's recovery. The two women exchanged experiences and offered each other the unique understanding that only someone fighting the same battle can provide. They were no longer rivals chasing Grand Slam titles. They were two women fighting for their lives, and their connection became a global symbol of what human beings are capable of when competition is set aside and raw humanity takes over. When Chris faced a relapse in 2023, the support network Andy Mill and her sons had built was tested again, and it held. The commitment was not a temporary gesture born of crisis. It was deep and lasting proof that the family they built across nearly 2 decades of marriage did not dissolve when the legal paperwork was signed. Real family is not defined only by a marriage certificate or an asset division agreement. It is defined by who shows up and who stays. Chris Evert ultimately overcame both her initial diagnosis and her relapse. She returned to her work as a tennis commentator, her hair growing back, her smile radiant, her spirit quieter but stronger than ever. She has become a passionate advocate for cancer screening, crediting her sister Jeannie's legacy with saving her life by prompting her to get tested before symptoms even appeared. And she has used her very public platform to deliver a message about forgiveness, love, and the kinds of connections that transcend financial and emotional barriers entirely. The story of Chris Evert and Andy Mill challenges every assumption we make about what divorce means, about what money can buy and what it cannot, and about what it truly means to love someone you once shared your life with. The $7 million was supposed to close the book on their relationship forever. Instead, Andy Mill proved that no amount of money can erase real kinship, real respect, and real love. When Chris needed him most, he repaid that sum not in dollars, but in something priceless: unconditional support and the quiet courage to stand beside someone in their darkest hour with no expectation of anything in return. Chris Evert won 18 Grand Slam titles and redefined professional tennis for generations. But her greatest victory is not found on any trophy shelf. It is found in the chemotherapy room where she was not alone, in the hospital where her sons and their father sat together, and in the quiet moments when the fear was at its worst and she looked around and saw people who truly loved her. True strength is not the ability to control everything. It is the courage to accept love and help from those who were once a part of your life, regardless of whatever complicated history lies in the past between you.